He checked every single person that got a deal on Dragon's Den was able to connect and articulate their business idea in 90 seconds or less.
Hello Sales Nation, I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, and welcome to today's episode. On today's show we have Nick Boothman, who is an expert in all things influence. On today's show he's sharing how we can all convince anyone of anything in 90 seconds or less. Sounds incredible. I know there's a lot to go at in this episode. You can find out more about Nick over at nicholasboothman.com. And with that all said, let's jump in to today's show. Hi Nicholas, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and please feel free to call me Nick. It's only Nicholas as the brand because my kids think it makes me sound more intelligent.
I have this conversation regularly with guests of, usually it's the publisher is demanding that they, especially with the authors, demanding that they use full names because it looks more proper on the page. But yes, Nick, we'll move forward with that. And today's conversation, convincing people in 90 seconds or less. I'm super intrigued to this. And where I want to open the conversation, Nick, is by asking you hopefully a leading question in that if the answer goes one way, it's going to be a very short interview. But is it really possible to convince someone to do something within just that minute and a half period?
Have you ever seen Shark Tank?
Uh-huh.
Have you ever seen Dragon's Den, which we have in Canada? Kevin O'Leary went back and checked, and he said to me that he checked every single person that got a deal on Dragon's Den was able to connect and articulate their business idea in 90 seconds or less. So yeah, absolutely it is. But you have to be very careful about how you look and what you say. I obviously I speak for a living, and which is why I wrote my book, so I get more speaking engagements. And it's amazing how many corporations cannot. If you say, "Why should I do business with you?" or "What does your company do?" They can't actually tell you in a compelling way in 5 or 6 or 7 seconds. So I actually teach companies to do that. And it springs from, I live on a farm in Canada, and every day as I drive into the city, when I drive into the city or to the airport, I pass a place which makes kitchens, really high quality kitchens. And we were looking for a kitchen. So about 5 years ago, I pulled over in the car, went in there, spoke to the sales guy, and he told me about the kitchens and what they can do. I said, okay, I've got a really simple, and I think a good question for you. Why should I do business with your company? And he said, why not? So I walked out and left. Well, not long after, I was speaking in Vienna to the global annual meeting of Remax. And I told this story, and about 4 people in the front row started laughing. I said, okay, fine. Why should I do business with your company? And they said, well, because you can trust us. I said, well, your competition's going to say the same thing. Well, because we've got a big network, your competition's going to say the same thing. So this isn't so funny. This is a really great question. And when you can tell somebody why they should do business with you or hire you or marry you in 8 or 9 seconds, you're really onto something. So I show them how to do it in a way that a 9-year-old would understand. If it works, after that, people can say, which is what goes to answering your question. If you can get something tasty enough and stuck in someone's head in 8 or 9 seconds, and they are the right person, and you said the right thing, and at the end of that, they say, oh, tell me more. Then you can take 2 hours to tell them, once they've asked you to tell you about more.
So I want to get into clearly the how is the super interesting bit of our conversation today, but just to tee that up a little bit further, should we always be going for a pitch and to get the person you're speaking to ask the question, tell me more, in 90 seconds or less? Or is there sometimes opportunities where it'd be better to elaborate? Is shorter always better?
Of course it is. Look, if you hook somebody, let's say you're flying on a plane and the person next to you says, so what do you do? Or you're standing at a bar waiting to get served and you realize that the guy next to you could be a big client. You actually know what they do. And they get chatting and say, so what do you do? You're not going to say, well, how long have you got? You're going to tell them here's what I say. Hey, Nick, what do you do? And I say, has 3 parts. You know how some people have trouble connecting and communicating? And they go, yeah. So, well, I write books and give speeches which are really simple so that they can spend more time meeting people and making connections. I've told them what I do, who I do it for, what the benefit is, how I do it. And now they can say, oh, really? How do you do that? Then I can start talking.
Nice. So there's clearly a structure there, which we'll come on to. But
Absolutely.
and before we do, just final thing to add a bit of suspense to the show, Nick. Is this a magic bullet, both in sales, in business, in even getting my girlfriend to do the dishes, perhaps, when I need to convince her to do that?
I think you probably just lost half your viewers, but I won't tell you with which one of those options. Uh, there's magic bullet. Who wants to talk about those things these days? It really separates the winners from the strugglers. That's for sure. Because the thing is that when you can articulate your ideas simply, not only can you tell them what you actually do for a living, you will find out yourself what you actually do for a living, and why it's important to other people. Most people have not got a really good clue about why they do what they do, except to earn a paycheck or have fun. They really don't know.
I bet, just so you're not offended, Nick, the girlfriend dish is a long-standing joke on the show, which I'll explain afterwards. But just so I don't offend you and you think that I'm a massive sexist and that affects the conversation moving forward. But again, before we get into the structure, because I think it's important to dive into all these ancillary ideas and concepts behind this before we just give a step-by-step process, because otherwise people aren't going to put the step-by-step process into practice. Why, and you've talked about it a bunch of times, why do salespeople in particular, and I've been in this situation of not having a concise pitch to convince people to continue the conversation with me. It seems so simple, and if there's a structure to do it, and clearly you've written books on it and speak on it, so there's a process and there's a method behind the madness, why don't we do it, and why aren't we implementing this?
All right, going back to the washing up for a minute. I was not offended. I have 4 daughters and a son. I have the total age of my children is 208. I've got a lot of experience with trying to get the dishes done, and I'll try anything I can to get them done. And so I'm not remotely offended. And now I've forgotten the question. Tell me a question again.
So why, if this is so important, and why, if there's a structure, why isn't everybody doing it?
Well, because everyone hasn't read my book. You don't ask me if it's important. You've got to know it's important. It's got to be important to get your message, to articulate your ideas and stick them in people's heads in a way that they get acted on. That's a sign of a leader. That's all. Whether you're a leader at home, a leader in business. But look, I've heard a lot of. If you ask 1,000 people their definition of a leader, you'll get 1,000 answers. My answer, which I like a lot, is a leader is simply someone who knows what to do and does it. Most people know what to do, but they don't do it. A leader knows what to do with it. They can bring all the visioning stuff in later. That's all. So this is about getting things done. If you want to delegate, if you want to get things done, make it nice and simple. Say it in the positive, not in the negative. Don't keep putting your dirty shoes at the door. No, put dirty shoes over there and clean shoes over there. That's all. And so it's about articulating your ideas correctly, because when you can articulate your ideas accurately to other people, you can do it to yourself too.
And where I want to go with this, and the question will make sense to you, hopefully with this one, Nick, are people then born good communicators, or is this a skill that we have to learn? What I'm getting at is, clearly not everyone is doing this. Since starting the podcast, I've learned more about being able to sell value, in a few sentences, because clearly that's the marketing angle of what I do with the podcast, in that you've got to have a clear and concise pitch to be able to grab people's attention, because you've only got a very fine window. But I've always thought of that more marketing than sales, but clearly it's relevant in sales. The salespeople who aren't doing this, is that because they aren't aware that it's important, or is it just because they haven't learnt to be able to become a better communicator by reading books and things of that nature?
Oh, yeah, you've given me an either or an or, but it's probably all bits. But here's the essence of one of the rants I give in my speeches, whether I'm speaking in Dubai, as I have recently, or Johannesburg, as I have recently, or Las Vegas, as I did last week. We live in a world where millions of introverts are forced to masquerade as extroverts to make a living, and it doesn't come easy. We live in a world where millions of children are being raised by parents who have no people skills. What can possibly be in store for them? We live in a world where we're told we're supposed to be leaders, and yet we live in a culture of blame. You cannot be a leader if the verb blame is in your vocabulary. You can't. It means you've handed control over your life and all of your decisions to somebody else. And the last one is, we're told that we're encouraged to avoid risk at all costs, and yet by taking risks, it is the only way we can grow and innovate. Human beings only grow when there's a slight whiff of danger in the air.
Nice.
So
That is exactly what I wanted to get.
good, thank you. And it was about 58 seconds. But what I'm saying is, it's a combination of those things. If you're born, you may be born hungry and ambitious, or in which case you will get what you want. Look, the greatest driver of all in this world for success is desperation. Desperation is stronger than vanity, God, love. When you're desperate, you don't think these people coming out of Syria right now and Libya, you don't think they want to swim around in the Mediterranean and go to Italy. They have to. They're desperate. And we are capable of extraordinary things when we're desperate. In fact, we're capable of 50 times more than we ever could when we just want something or we just have goals. Get yourself desperate. You'll make amazing things happen.
Well, that's props another conversation we can have, Nick, if you come back on in the future. I like your angle on that. And I think that me personally, I've only ever made great leaps in my life, both in sales, in business, and personal life and that as well, when I have put myself, kind of burnt the bridges and put myself into I can't clearly compare it to refugees, but put myself in a more desperate situation of moving from one end of the country to the other for a new sales role, not knowing anyone, not knowing the industry and that kind of thing. And that's where I've personally thrived. But pulling it back to convincing people in 90 seconds or less. So you alluded to it before. Is there a framework? Is there a structure? And can, by the end of this episode, the audience take away the process to go from because they're probably listening to this on their way to a sales meeting, driving in the car at the moment. Can they, in the distance and the time from here to the sales meeting, put a pitch together that will convince people in 90 seconds or less?
They can do it in the next 90 seconds. I'll tell you the 3 parts to it. The first part is, how, blah, 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 blah. You know how some podcasts waft off the topic? Yes. Well, the next part is, we pay great attention to staying focused, which will be your words, so the audience can get the maximum benefit and information out of my show. So why should I listen to your show? You know how some podcasts, that's it. That's all you need to know. You know how, we, so they, or so you. That's it. And you fill in your own words afterwards. And then the secret is to be able to say it when you're asleep, when you're drunk, when you're exhausted. It has to be able to fall out of your mouth. People will then believe you. And then they will say, if you said that to me, I say, that's really interesting. About time someone does that. I've done a few of these. Tell me more about your show. That's all you want. You want them to say the magic word. Okay, tell me more.
And how important, because you use the language then of your own words, how important is it for you to come up with this and be congruent versus your corporate sales manager to say, this is your pitch, these are the words to use, now go and ram it down the throat to everyone that you meet? We
can all smell a phony a mile off. Look, we have the fight or flight response. It takes 2 seconds to decide if I'm going to take someone seriously or not. If they come up with a pitch, down goes the phone, out of the store you walk, roll your eyes, whatever, we can smell a phony. We're not stupid. If someone's reading to you from a script or has memorized something, it's as creepy as walking into a store and someone says, so how are you today? You don't care how I am today. Can't you think of anything better to say than that? But that's the way it goes.
So how do we then become congruent in this? Because I think this is something that's seriously lacking in the sales industry. So we're obviously having a conversation on the B2B side of things versus the B2C of you walk into a shop and someone greets you in such a manner that you just described then. But in B2B, you have a similar kind of thing of you pick up the phone and it's, hi, how are you? And a lot of the conversations that I have, and especially with people pitching me now that I've got the podcast and I've got an audience, and whether it's people pitching me to come on, let's use the example of people pitch me all the time to come on the show. We get inundated with people requesting to be in front of our audience. Clearly, they want to sell products, books, services, whatever it is, and that's fine. If they can add value to the audience, I'll have them on and I'll happily promote what they're pitching. But sometimes it's horrible slimy, and I feel grossed and weirded out when people kind of trying to go around that point and they email me or get me on Skype or the phone and say, hey, I want to just do this for you and yada yada, when you know they're on a book tour and it's really incongruent. What's the difference between a congruent pitch that works and you get a really friendly response from them versus one where you feel manipulated, for a better word?
Well, how you feel is up to you, and I say that with respect. However, I will say that I teach a course called How to Write a Saleable Book in 10-Minute Bursts of Madness. And I do teach people how to become speakers. And my first rule to them is you better go off and become the world's biggest expert on your topic before you do anything. Even if it's in your own mind, you have to know who is the best expert in the country, in the world, in your state or your county. You have to know what is the best book on the subject. You have to be able to answer any question. And you know what? Once you've done that, something amazing happens. You ain't a slime ball anymore. People want you on their show. I studied everything. I mean, even look, never mind my first 3 books, which have all bestsellers and all gone into more than 30 languages. The book I'm writing right now called Be Brave, Take Risks, and Make Great Things Happen. I have studied this particular topic from 1,000 different levels. And when I talk about it, people drool. So it's like, here's a good example. My youngest daughter, Pippa, is 34 years old. She's actually started today working in a company in Oslo. She was headhunted from one of the biggest French high-tech companies in Paris, which she flew up yesterday, starts work. Pippa's been hunted all over the place. She started work at a place called Sport Check in Toronto in her school holidays, selling stuff. Within a very short time, she was earning more commission as a part-timer than the full-timers were earning. And they started looking at her and say, well, how come? You know what? Pippa never gave a sales pitch. When they went off to junkets, when Salmon Skis or whoever took them off for junkets, and everyone was getting drunk, Pippa was going around finding out more about every product. She knew more about the products than anybody in the store. There was no sales pitch involved. She could just talk about it. I mean, it's like you. You can talk to me. When we first got rapport, when you called me, we found common ground and we started talking like a couple of pros. You were talking to tech stuff about what you're doing, and I'm talking about what I'm doing. There is no pitch in when it comes to that. So if someone wants to call you and get on your show, what is revolting you is that you don't want them on the show, because you're not going to make any money off them. Because, I used to be a fashion photographer. If a girl walked through the door and she wasn't even a model, I can make money off that chick. She look amazing on the cover of Vogue, and it's that kind of thing. So you want people who are going to make your show look good. So they have to come across like they know everything and they can convey it to you in sexy sound bites, which really get your audience hooked. Because that's all you're having guests on here for. Is you know lots of stuff, but you want your guests to be excited and learn stuff. That's all. And look, I've realized lately, because I've been doing a lot of work out of, never mind, wherever, I have realized we are surrounded by a lot of liars. There are a lot of people out there. They lie. They don't even know they're lying anymore. They've been saying this stuff, and it's true now. Look, I was a bestseller on Amazon. Are you kidding? I can tell by the way the paper bends on your stupid book. It was self-published. Oh no, it's been they're everywhere. So what you're looking for, and what your viewers your audience is looking for, is people who are real experts and can get their expertise across in a very compelling and appealing way that is memorable. How do they sell to get on your show? Well, they have to work hard. That's all they have to do, is work hard and write a book.
So is the crux of all this, Nick, that perhaps salespeople aren't being congruent because they're not experts, and so if we go a step deeper below the tactical step-by-step process, which you laid out very eloquently, and it seems very simple to implement, is it that there's the lack of congruency is that people say, I do this, that does this, this is the benefits we can give kind of thing, but they're not congruent in it because they don't believe it in themselves?
Bang on, absolutely, you bang on. In other words, just in case not everybody knows what congruent means, it means that when your body language, your voice tone, and your words are all saying the same thing, you are congruent, so people will believe you. That's what actors do. they look like, they sound like, they act like what they mean. And to do that, you can't fool yourself. You know, if you don't have the knowledge, or if you're bullying it, it's going to come across in your body language. I have people who say, I used to be called on, I don't do it anymore, to go on US television networks after the presidential debates back in the day when it was two people having a debate. And I knew, first of all, I gave it up because you automatically lose half your readers by saying that guy was no good and that other guy was good. But I used to see people saying things like, I have a vision. And I'm thinking, well, if you have a vision, it better be over there and not over there. Otherwise, it's not a vision. But your body's giving it away. It's just telling another story.
So is the magic bullet, and I hate to use that phrase, and you'll understand this in a second, and the hack, and whatever way you want to describe this, is it to not study body language and to get super into depth and have knowledge of it? Is the solution way more simple than that? Is that you just become an expert and it all happens naturally?
As far as body language goes, before I wrote my first book, I looked at books on body language, and I think one I read was about 290 pages, and it said, if this happens, turn to page 18, paragraph 2, and do this like that. No. The idea, I mean, there are a few basics. Look them in the eye, smile, open your body language, synchronize. This is all in the first 5 seconds, and then find common ground. That's all you need to do with somebody. When I train speakers to go on the stage, I don't tell them to go and do this with their hands. There are plenty of people who say, keep your hands like that. This means, no, just get passionate about it, get on stage, everyone will pick it up. But find a way to care desperately about your topic. Whether you're if I was selling something, if I wanted to get on your show and I was absolutely desperate about my topic, I wouldn't lie to you and make up stories. You would think, oh, one day this guy's going to be on my show because he's crazy about what he does, and that's the secret. When you're crazy about what you do, you will look like, sound like, and act like you mean what you're saying, because you are.
Okay, this leads to a different conversation then, Nick, and we'll wrap up this part of the show with this perhaps. How, or is it even possible to become crazy about a B2B software product that is inherently, a product for accountants that is inherently, by every stereotype, the dullest thing possible? Is it possible to get yourself excited about something like that?
Absolutely. When you know how you make the world go round and make the world a better place. You see, that little phrase I gave you, I have a thing called a statement of fortune. You find your statement, you find out what you're actually born for and put it in a short statement. And this is what my new book's about. In my particular case, when I was 47, I went and found my statement of fortune. And my statement of fortune said, I make complicated concepts sound simple and interesting. Okay, that's what I do. And my whole life I'd done that. I spent my life at school standing in the corridor because the teacher would say something and they'd say, Nicky Boothman, I told you not to do that. Go and stand in the corridor. So that's what I do now. I'm making complicated concepts sound simple and interesting. So I can get excited about anything as long as I'm making it sound simple and interesting. If your statement of fortune, yours, for example, your statement of fortune may well be that, I bring great news to the world, okay, or however you put it yourself. And that's all you do. How do you do it? Oh, by giving radio shows. How do I make complicated concepts sound simple and interesting? Oh, by giving speeches and writing books. Okay. If you're selling some boring software product, well, maybe it's not that boring. And maybe it's boring to you because you consider it to be boring, but maybe you're helping the world go around. Maybe somewhere along the line you saved a life because someone did something else and the bus didn't go that way. It went down. I don't know. Work hard, dig deep and fight. I'm getting excited and find out how you help make the world go round. And it's a lot deeper than what you're actually doing.
Perfect. So this lines me up for my last question in this segment, Nick. Should your pitch, the way that you're going to introduce yourself, should it be, I do X, Y, Z, which leads to X, Y, Z, or should it be, I sell this product that does X, Y, Z, that does X, Y, Z? Should we be going that one level deeper and pitching ourselves rather than the company that we work for?
No, it's what I said on that little what I call the pub approach. You know how look, if you're selling a B2B software product, I don't know what it does. Give me an example of a product.
Well, we could be selling Skype for business, so a video conferencing software.
You know how some people just simply can't afford to get on a plane and go and see somebody. They have to do it over the air. And they go, yeah, well, we have developed this system that really simple, so a kid can understand it, so they can stay in their offices, make notes, and feel much more brighter or refreshed about what they do. That's what. So you're telling them what the benefit of the product is. You're telling what it does, how it does it, and how it makes them feel afterwards. Okay. Then you can tell them the rest of the stuff.
Let me just jump in here, because I think there's a differentiation between what I was asking, and you've given an answer on a slight angle there and a tangent, which is good. And I didn't ask the question well enough, of course. Should we say we do this as a company as your initial kind of introduction when you meet someone new on a plane or whatever it is, or should you say I enable people to not have to travel because I sell this product? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't say that. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think it's important to figure out what you do. You know how. If you can stay with me for a second, it's important to know what you do rather than how you do it. For example, Marriott hotels makes people away from home feel as if they're among friends. How do they do it? Oh, by there's a guy who was around for a long time, is not here anymore, who designed products which were beautifully designed and user friendly. How did he do it? Oh, we make computers. We make watches. It's what are you actually doing underneath what you're doing? So when you're going to phone somebody up, that's where you go from. People want to know how they're going to make their life better. That's all. And I think, I've got a briefcase full of brochures. Not anymore. It doesn't happen. I'm here today and gone to all that stuff. No, I think you have to talk to them like an adult, like a grown up, and let the people know how that what you're doing conversationally benefits their company. No jargon, no challenges, no issues, no talk like a person. But you have to know what you're talking about.
Nice. I think that's what I've taken away from today's show, of the becoming an expert in your industry simply just seems to make everything else easier. It seems like a no-brainer, but I think sales professionals, and I've done this myself, it's so easy to feel the grass is greener, to jump from industry to industry, from job to job. Of course, most people are money-minded in those kind of roles, and it's a common theme that's coming out on the show over the past few months, of the people who are willing to stick it out, really commit to an industry, to a group of customers, whether it be local or a differentiated group of customers across the globe. They're the ones that really win 4 or 5 years down the line. And with that, Nick, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. These are quick fire questions, but feel free to elaborate if you like. First one, which do you prefer, Canada or the UK?
Canada. Canada's paradise.
Nice.
I have tons of Brit friends who came over here, and they still stand up when the national anthem, British one, not for the Canadian one, and they're all basically unemployed and unemployable. No, I'm a Canadian. I live in Canada, so I'm a proud Canadian. This is paradise, huh? Canada spells differently, paradise.
Nice. Next one, dollar size if possible. What's the biggest deal you've ever closed?
I don't close deals. I was a fashion photographer. I mean, sure, biggest deal I've ever closed is now when I speak for $15,000 an hour. That's not bad.
Nice. Next one. What is one?
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. What's one book or resource other than your own, which we'll come on to in a minute, that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
Oh, people ask me this all the time. I don't have one. I don't have one that they probably haven't read already. But you can see, I'd have to read it out of myself because I don't know.
Nice. Well, you're the first person who hasn't just spat out the first thing that's probably on their mind, which is interesting, shows that you're congruent and kind of leads into the show as well. And final one of these quick ones, what does the first 60 minutes of your day look like?
If I'm writing, which I am now, I wander down the corridor, 100 feet. I live on a big farmhouse, sit down, switch this on, and start writing, and then have an espresso coffee. I don't know if it takes 60 minutes or 5 hours. I'm still here sometimes. If I'm not, I go down to my local cafe called Tim Hortons and sit there and watch all the old people wander in and out, especially when I'm looking for dialogue. I just listen to people coming in and out. Simple. I live on the countryside on a beautiful farm.
Nice. It sounds like you're living the dream. I'm excited for you with all that. And final one, Nick. I know you're not a quote unquote salesperson, but of course everyone has to sell.
We're all salespeople.
So with this, obviously you'll have some insights for it, I'm sure. But if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Be brave, take risks, and blame no one.
When or how or why did you learn that not blaming other people was so important?
I've always believed in it because I know that all human behavior is a feedback loop. And if you blame somebody else, it's called locus of control. You put the control in the hands of somebody else. If you blame the traffic that you're late, you've failed to realize that you're an idiot for not getting up sooner, or blame the ex, or blame the union, or blame the celebrities, or the doctors, or the Russians, or the whatever for what's happened to you. You're off your rocker. So blame is the biggest one in the world. My kids will blame no one for anything. So that means they can get on with what they're doing.
Nice. I appreciate that. And Nick, we've talked about it a bunch of times throughout the show. Tell us a little bit about the book. Obviously, your other books are relevant for this as well, and where we can find out more about you as well.
NicholasBoothman.com is my website. We're talking about this book, Convince Them, right? Yeah, okay. Well, interesting about this is that it was originally called How to Connect in Business in 90 Seconds or Less. And when the French put it out, because the word 90 in French is a ridiculous word, they called it Convince Them in 2 minutes or less. And we don't know why, but for about a year, it was the number 2 sports book in France, the number 4 medical book in France, and the number 1 couples book in France. So we changed the name to Convince Them in English. It's not a new business, a new way of doing business. It's just about connecting and articulating your ideas and putting them into other people's heads so they can't really shake them loose.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I appreciate you being so candid, and your enthusiasm comes across on camera and on audio. So I really appreciate that, Nick. And I just want to thank you again for your time. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you. Great show. Good focus.